to the Free State, and I imagine that the Frida community is still reeling from the death of Philemon Ngwenya. He was an outspoken critic. What did you find when you arrived?
So, just to give the viewers an idea of just how small a community this is, Pumalela local municipality has got less than 50,000 people. It's got 47,000 people, in fact, according to SARS. So when something like this happens, there's such a close-knit community that it really has rocked this community. And they become known as those who speak truth to power within the community, those that were failed in the most fundamental way through this project, unfortunately, but also locally have kind of become heroes because they went on television. It became national news. These are people that spoke up for their rights after they were failed and lied to. So it's a very tough situation for this community and the family and the friends, because that group of 80 intended beneficiaries, they've really stuck together for the last 6 years and have become a kind of a family in itself.
I imagine that, you know, when something like this happens, especially for such a small community and especially the 80 beneficiaries, there are many ways in which they interpret what has happened. How much of it is seen by that community as a means to silence them?
Well, you know, you have to be very delicate when dealing with a subject like this, bearing in mind the consequences that it's a project that had a lot of political heads. There were people who made promises. Those who criticized the lack of those promises being met have now been murdered. One of them has now been murdered. And the Times reports that they're in possession of an audio clip that there is talk of a second beneficiary, intended beneficiary, who is critical of this plan to also be murdered. The police, I'm told, are looking into that audio clip as well. So it was one of the first questions that I had to very delicately ask the daughter of Philemon Ngwenya, Loliwe Ngwenya, when I spoke to her yesterday.
Well, the community, they are still in shock. So it is difficult. I don't know what I can say about that, but wonke umuntu uthukile ngayo yonke into enzekile, and abantu nabo sabathukile for impilo zabo.
Well, people fear for their lives. How is that family doing in particular?
He's got 2 daughters. They're struggling. I mean, it's still very raw. She was incredibly kind to speak to us yesterday, but we danced around outside. We didn't want to intrude on this occasion, but they're trying to be as strong as possible. But understandably, if they do know a lot, they're not going to say it on camera, bearing in mind what has happened, what the suspicion is.
Michael, what does the community attribute his murder to? You know, there must be some thoughts by the community around what they think may have happened here. Did people at least share part of what they thought with you, or is there just complete silence?
It was to silence Philemon Ngwenya. That's what they believe was behind this. His cell phone was taken. His car was not stolen. From sources I understand, he wasn't killed at his home. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. The way that his body was placed after his corpse was brought back, there are too many questions. I asked one of them what they thought happened, and he said, we cannot take anything for granted. And yes, they say we want the police to look into this. They all have their own suspicions around this. And the greatest suspicion that springs to mind is it was to silence a vocal critic of the absolute failure of this project.
All right. It also comes in a week where we have the CASAC and the DA taking the Public Protector's report on the Estina Dairy Farm project, taking it on review because they believe its findings really need to be relooked at. Has the Public Protector's Office had anything to say about these developments, given the extent to which, they're integral even to the report itself? These beneficiaries are integral to that report.
So when I put the tweet out saying that Philemon Ngwenya had been murdered last week Thursday, I tagged the Public Protector in that tweet because I know that the Public Protector's Office is planning to go to Estina in November to convene a public hearing with all the intended beneficiaries to find out the prejudice that they have suffered as a result of this failed project or the money being diverted somewhere else. So I was in touch with the Public Protector's Office today to confirm whether that meeting in November is still going ahead. That is the plan. I was told that is still the plan. But of course, if you have people's lives, if they're feeling under threat, and because you don't know the circumstances under which Mr. Ngwenya died, it will be a very precarious position.
Does that trip form part of the report? Is the Public Protector investigating another report around the Estina Dairy project? I mean, on what grounds are they going there to hold this meeting with the community?
So when I spoke to the Public Protector's Office in June, July, they had this initial report, which was slammed for being too narrow. It went after the bean counters, not the political office bearers that were perhaps issuing the instructions to the people. So she said they're going to commission a new report that is going to look wider at the beneficiaries in particular, as they were left out completely from the last report. But as we know, things are in court now. But as the plan stood then, it was to form part of a new report looking at the intended beneficiaries and the political appointees and political office bearers that the finger was pointed at the time.
All right, Michael, let's leave it there for tonight.